Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cave of the Cross Apologetics. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Tony.
And we're reaching the end of our evidences. We're all out of evidence after this.
That's right.
Of course, we're in the midst of our book, Faith Has Its Reasons, and we've done this book before apart from you, but we've come bearing good gifts in that even though we don't agree with every person in the places where they put them or argumentation that they might find positive or negative, we believe that this is a really excellent book. So hopefully you've picked it up. If not, it's linked on caveofthecross.com or on any of the links that we have on the videos and wherever you get your podcast from. And so we're in the midst of our second method of apologetics. So we covered the classical model, and now we're in the evidentialist model with two others to go, and actually a third one after that. And so we've kind of given a breakdown of all the people that kind of subscribe to the evidentialist model. We've talked about the meta-apologetic, the structure that the evidentialist holds to in their argumentation. And then we talk about the six main questions that kind of all models have to answer as the big six of things, things like the problem of evil, what about Jesus, what about the Bible, theology, science, etc. And so now we're kind of giving you the concluding chapter to this, and then launching into a kind of a positive and negative understanding from our authors on the evidentialist model. So we're in chapter 11, Apologetics and the Interpretation of Fact. But I thought all facts were brute facts, and you just lay them out there. Interpretations. Okay, all right. We're reaching past this chapter here a little bit. Well, here in this concluding chapter on evidentialist apologetics, we will summarize our authors this model or paradigm for apologetics, and then consider its major strengths and weaknesses. Well, here the evidentialist model, as explained in chapter 3, they've summarized each model of apologetics system under two headings: meta-apologetics and apologetics, the six specific questions under each heading. And here they apply this analysis to the evidentialist model.
Right. And so they start off with these various, as you mentioned there, meta-apologetic questions, right? Meta-apologetic questions deal with the relation of apologetics to other forms of human knowledge. And so if you've been following us, you'll recall that in chapter 9, we considered the evidentialist approach to answering questions about knowledge in general, theology, philosophy, science, history, and experience. And so in this chapter, what we get here is a summary of the findings that we talked about in chapter 9.
Right. So the first one is, on what basis do we claim that Christianity is true according to the evidentialists? Well, the evidential apologetics is dominated by inductive, imperial reasoning and seeks to build its case from a mass of factual evidences, kind of a throw it all in the pot, the gumbo of apologetics. You apply them with history. If they don't like history, there's always science. There's always the resurrection. There's the makeup of the universe. The world is your oyster as far as evidences, because all facts are God's facts, and so we can present the evidences for the possibility of God, and then the conclusion that Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of the image bearer, ultimately of the Godhead, and so of course they're going to want to point to him ultimately. Well, the classical approach typically launches its argument into two stages. The first seeks to prove the theistic worldview, while the second, building on the first, seeks to prove the specific central claims of the Christian faith. The evidentialist approach typically involves one complex process of mounting a case for truth of the whole of the Christian theistic faith, though almost always with the case turning on the evidence for Jesus' death and resurrection. Why? Because Christ is at the center of the Christian theistic faith. So there's the Christ focus.
Right. So again, the classicalist has a two-step approach, right? First, they prove that God exists, and then secondly, they prove that, they talk about the claims of the Christian faith. And And the evidentialist has really kind of what our authors at least are suggesting is a one-step approach, right? Where they just have a complex process of mounting a case with regard to the evidence. And so both of these approaches, classicalist and the evidentialist, are really similar because for the most part, many or much of the evidentialist approach, that's their one-step approach, is taken up in the classical approach's second step, right? So we might say that the evidentialist just has a one step easier, right? They just have that one-step approach. But it's very similar to how the classicalists do that second step. So evidentialists do not believe, however, that the factual evidence in and of itself produces faith. Excuse me. And in fact, most of them deny believing that faith requires evidence. Faith is based on the witness of the Holy Spirit, right? So evidentialists do maintain, however, that what sets Christianity apart from other religions is that it is rooted in facts that are in principle verifiable on the basis of publicly accessible evidence, right? So everybody has access to these various facts. They're accessible to the public. And so we can base our argument for Christianity on these publicly accessible facts or this publicly accessible evidence.
Mm-hmm. So when asked to dance by a classicalist or an evidentialist, don't pick the classicalist. He's got two steps and they're complicated, rooted in logic and philosophy. Pick the evidentialist, one step, and the information is kind of this generally agreed upon, publicly accessible. So
that's right. So your toes are less likely to be stepped on.
Yeah, or
right.
Vice versa.
Right.
All right, the second one is, what is the relationship then between apologetics and theology? Well, evidentialists view the relationship between the two as one of defense and exposition of the same truth. That is, apologetics offers the reasoned defense of the Christian beliefs that are explained and defined in theology. And then moreover, apologetics and theology utilize essentially the same method, both reason inductively from the data of or facts to conclusions using a method similar to what the science uses. The apologist appeals to facts about and from the Bible to show that that Christianity is true, and that the theologians appeals to facts of the Bible to show what Christianity means. And so there's no laying aside the Bible. You're still applying it, and you're pulling facts from there and saying, where does this match up in the world that you see around you? Known facts from non-biblical history, and you're going to bolster your claims by saying, oh, look at Philo, he mentions it. Look at Josephus, he mentions Christ. There you're grounding the biblical evidences in the exterior evidences that kind of more the populace would agree upon if they're not believers.
Right, exactly. All right, so that's number two, the relationship between apologetics and theology. And again, they use the Bible to show that Christianity is true, right? And they appeal to the facts of the Bible to show that Christianity, what it means. All right, number three, should apologists engage in philosophical defense of the Christian faith? Now, this might sound odd because we're saying, well, I thought apologetics was all about philosophy, right? But there, as we will see later on, there are some approaches that dismiss philosophy with regard to arguing for God. And so what does the evidentialist do with regard to philosophy and the philosophical defense of the Christian faith? Well, evidentialists view philosophy as a crucial tool for understanding the implications of the sciences and matters beyond the sciences' direct competency. For example, while the sciences cannot examine God, they can examine the world he created and infer his existence from the evidence in the world, right? And thus, evidentialists then do use philosophy, but primarily as a means of clarifying concepts and analyzing the methods and reasoning used in discussing matters of theological significance in the light of natural science and human history. So yes, they do use it, but they use it to analyze, clarify, and that sort of thing.
Right. And this isn't something that's unheard of in science. In science, think about dark matter. If you know anything about the concept of dark matter, the gravitational pull on all the properties within the universe seems to be really small from the observable mass that's kind of seen and known. And so scientists have come up with this kind of rescuing device that's a entity of ether out there that says, well, there must be something, some sort of dark matter that you can't see that has this quantifiable mass to it, but we just aren't able to be aware of it with our known kind of concepts of science. And so they're saying, hey, from our known perspective, here's the things we know. And from there, we can conclude then that there's this kind of unknown entity collection of mass that is out there, and we just can't observe it with our tools or the way the universe is so big. And so there's a correlation between what's kind of known and then observed, and then the implication of it, which is this unknown collection of particles or whatever it might be, the dark matter out there. And so that's what our evidentialists are doing, is they're saying, well, if we can't observe God directly, as far as like, here he is and let's cut off his toenail and put it under a microscope, here's the influence that he has in the universe. And so we're going to be able to look at that point to who he is. So just like dark matter, that was as convoluted as dark matter is. So if science can do it, so can I.
That's right.
Well, the fourth one has to do with science. Well, can science be used to defend the Christian faith? Of the four apologetic approaches, evidentialism makes the most positive use of science. While evidentialists do not accept all conventional scientific theories uncritically, they tend to be more confident in their use of scientific information and theories to support theistic conclusions than other approaches. These are the ones that tend to critique maybe the theory of evolution, and while they might not be young Earth creationists yet, they will point to the very fact that without a common designer or a first cause being greater than the universe, or a mind in order to imbue DNA with information that passes along information, like we see all of their sources of information having a source that is also information. They're ones to utilize those same methods kind of against the non-believing scientist or those who are non-believers but still hold to the ability to know things in the universe via the scientific method.
Okay. And then the fifth one, can the Christian faith be supported by historical inquiry? And, as we mentioned, while evidentialists tend to make confident and even enthusiastic use of science and apologetics, most of them base their apologetic primarily, and in some cases exclusively, on historical evidence, right? This is, we might say, where the evidentialists shine in this particular area with regard to historical inquiry, right? So in their view, the Christian faith, in its essence, involves belief that God has done certain things in history for our salvation, specifically in the death and resurrection of Jesus.
Right. Exactly. That's the one that they're known for. So they're going to hit it. Well, they admit that historical knowledge as such can never rise above probability, but contend that this is so with all knowledge of matters of fact. Yet we base life and death decisions on such knowledge every day. Can you prove to me that the water you're drinking that comes out of your tap isn't poison? Well, if you wait until you have the necessary means to negate all poisons, then you're either going to be very thirsty or you're going to be winding up on the floor with your kidneys screaming at you. Furthermore, they argue that there is plenty of evidence for the historicity of the central events of the Christian faith. So you might hear the term kind of minimal facts or even maximal facts, depending on Habermas or the McGrews, to name a couple. And so those tend to be the ones that are put forth, and the popular books might contend for those a little bit. In fact, if you didn't get lost in the minutia of all my book reviews, I did a review of William Lane Craig's the historical evidences for the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus in one of his books. In fact, Josh McDowell one as well that I didn't find as favorable, but that's just more format than content. So you can check that out as well.
All right. And then finally, the sixth meta-apologetic question, it says that how is our knowledge of Christian truth related to our experience, right? So how is experience in Christianity and our knowledge of Christianity related to one another? And the Evidentialists recognize, our book tells us, that people have religious experiences. Personal subjective experiences are meaningful or helpful, though, only to the persons experiencing them. Right. So if we are to commend the truth of Christianity to people, evidentialists conclude that we must appeal to publicly accessible facts. Testimonies of changed lives may help people see that Christianity is not only about events in the past, but the evidence that demands a verdict is to be found in history, right? So yes, they acknowledge experience, they acknowledge religious experience, but obviously they want to focus on the facts, right? The evidence that that Christianity is true.
Right. It's nice that you were, shown the light and everything like that, and you had this epiphany that changed your lifestyle. But we need to get down to the brass tacks where we can point everybody to and say, this is a more universal concept of a truth. Although helpful for you or maybe other people around you, or even those who are convinced by personal stories, that's not exactly what they're looking for. All right, well, then we move on to the sixth type of kind of straightforward apologetic questions. We dealt with the meta-apologetics of evidentialism. And so here's what our authors say in summary for the evidentialist for these six questions. The first one is, why believe the Bible at all? Well, the apologetic questions will deal with issues commonly raised by non-Christians themselves. And in Chapter 10, we consider the approaches evidentialism takes to answering questions about the Bible, Christianity, other beliefs, existence of God, problem of evil, credibility of miracles, and the claims of Jesus Christ. And here we're going to summarize the findings of the chapters.
All right, so let's start with that first one. Why should we believe the Bible, right? So most evidentialists begin their apologetic by presenting evidence not for the inspiration of the Bible, but for its historical reliability, right? They emphasize the authenticity of the biblical text as it has been passed down through the centuries, as well as the historical credibility of its contents. And so they want to use this material to present their central apologetic argument, namely that the historical facts show that Jesus rose from the dead. So in turn, Jesus' resurrection then will validate Jesus' teaching and by extension, the teaching of the entire Bible. So notice they don't directly give us, these various arguments for the inspiration of the Bible. They want to focus on its historical reliability. And then from there, right, if they can show that, then they can move to Jesus' resurrection, and that will validate his teaching, and by his extension, then the teaching of the entire Bible. So that's kind of their approach with regard to the Bible.
Right. Jesus existed. He taught many things. He lived a perfect life. He died, resurrected, after saying that when he was alive that he would rise from the dead. Happens. Well, it's kind of hard to argue against that, but kind of people do. So we'll get to that later. Well, the second question is, well, don't all religions lead to God? And here's their response to pluralism. The major premise of religious pluralism is that all religions are kind of basically alike. Evidentialists attack this premise directly by appealing to the historically verifiable miracles of the Bible, especially the resurrection of Jesus, as proof of the uniqueness of Christianity. So, the guy saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one can come to the Father through me, does such a big thing like rise from the dead in support of all his claims. then the in that statement that he made tends to preclude him from being combined with people like Muhammad or Vishnu or pick your person.
Buddha or whoever.
Right.
Yeah. Good. All right. And then the third kind of apologetic question here asked, how do we know that God exists, right? And so evidentialists typically do not reject the classical theist proofs. Remember these various proofs for the existence of God that we saw when we were examining the classical apologetics, the ontological argument, the cosmological argument, the teleological argument. So they don't necessarily reject these proofs, although most of them, our book tells us, do reject the ontological argument. But they rework these arguments into fact-based evidentiary arguments to augment or replace the classical deductive philosophical proofs, right? So you recall that the classicalist attempts deductive arguments with regard to these arguments for the existence of God. As we know, William Lane Craig uses the Kalam cosmological argument is a deductive argument, right? Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, and therefore the universe has a cause. So that is deductive. What do we mean by that? Well, if the premises are true, then they force the conclusion to be true. So deductive argument, the inference relationship between the premises and the conclusion is one of necessity, right? And as we saw in our examination of evidentialists, they lean more toward probability arguments, that is inductive arguments, and not deductive arguments with regard to necessity. So the evidentialists, for instance, would point also to miracles. They point to fulfilled prophecy and other evidences from the Bible to support belief in the existence of God, right?
Right. And if you want to see why things like the Kalam don't reach the pinnacle of all proofs, you can check out our short clip that we made for the Kalam argument for our classical arguments and look at all the people responding against the negative approach to the Kalam. It's probably one of our most well-received one of our most well-received short clips from the atheist point of view. Then the fourth one, halfway through our list here, is if God does exist, well, here we go. Why does he permit evil? It's something that we all have to answer for. It's probably one of the most presented kind of initial claims when you're witnessing to friends even. They might punctuate it with a personal story of loss or suffering. And so here the evidentialist, what does he or she have to offer when it comes to this question of why does God permit evil? Well, classical apologists usually address the problem of evil in the most historically familiar form as a logical conundrum. How can God be all-powerful and all-loving yet permit evil? Well, evidentialists may discuss the problem in this form too, but they most characteristically deal with it in the matter of probability or evidence. Evidentialists point out various reasons why certain evils may be present in the world and argue that the positive evidences for God's existence is so great that the problem of evil doesn't make his existence unlikely. So they say, yep, let's grant the fact that all these evil things in the world are true and are evil, and we'll take everything for you. Regardless of that, here's all the evidence for God's existence. And so where it comes from on making the theodicy make sense for a reason for why evil exists, that's kind of a secondary nature. So let's first get you to believe that a God exists, and then we can say, well, since God exists, he permits evil in some fashion, in some form. So let's talk about that. Probably a Bible study, probably going from the belief that God exists. Let's look at ways in which we can kind of complete the circle and say that that evil can exist and God still exists as well.
And then so that's the problem of evil. And then the fifth one, the fifth kind of apologetic question here, asked, aren't the miracles of the Bible spiritually myths or legends and not literal facts, right? And so to answer, of whether miracles are myths or facts, evidentialists answer simply, look at the evidence, right? They agree that it is reasonable to be somewhat skeptical of miracle claims, but they insist that though that is, it's unreasonable to decide that no amount of evidence could ever warrant belief that a miracle has occurred, right? Moreover, evidentialists may claim that in some cases, the evidence for a miracle is so great that even a person who does not already believe in God can and should recognize it as a miracle. And thus, they think the evidence for miracles can provide rational grounds for belief in God's existence. So not only do they use, miracles, they suggest that they can be true, but indeed they argue that they can even give us grounds for belief in God. And again, they would say this is what the New Testament authors were doing, right? Why should we believe that Jesus is who he claims he is? Well, he rose from the dead. There's the miracle, right? And so that's kind of the approach that the evidentialists take.
If you're looking for a good presentation on miracles from an evidentialist, a friend of the show, Tim McGrew, has a number of lectures online that kind of deal with that. So that's definitely a good resource to seek out and find. All right, then our final one of the 6 apologetic questions that every method has to answer is, what do we do about Jesus? Why should I believe in Jesus? Nearly all evidentialists view the resurrection of Jesus as the primary factual basis for faith in Jesus. Even the most, what we would say, squishy believer would probably point to ultimately the resurrection of Jesus. It is Jesus' resurrection that vindicates his claim to be the Messiah, the Son of God, and that also reveals his death to have been a redemptive sacrifice for sins. So from the historical point, here are kind of the 3 conclusions that you must draw from this historical event. The origin and history of the church would be unintelligible without the resurrection. Where did the church pop up from? Why are all these people going to their death? Why are the people in the streets? Why are they going against the might of Rome? Well, it doesn't make sense where the church came from without the resurrection. So evidentialists argue that people should believe in Jesus because the facts show him to be what the Bible says he is. And one of those things is to look at the formation of the church, the argument from martyrdom, the internal witness of the apostles very prominently saying, listen, I didn't believe this until this point, and it shows this area where I was deficient in. And so if you're making the case, why would you kind of have a lack of knowledge? Why aren't you the hero of the story? So that type of argumentation of an internal evidence within the text points to the fact that the resurrection is the central point which we should hang our hat on.
All right, so those are the 6 apologetic questions, right? And so we've worked our way through a little more than halfway of this chapter. Do you want to continue on here, or shall we break here and pick it up the next half the next time?
Well, let's pick up the next half where we do the positives and the negatives. It kind of goes with the same kind of style that we did with the classicalists, because we had things to say still about all the meta-apologetics and apologetics. So we'll finish up our chapter on chapter 11, and again, we don't tend to do the skit because Tony is a terrible actor, and I'm even less good than him. So
yeah,
so
you don't want me acting.
You won't want to see that. You'll tune out for it from even then. So next time we'll talk about the different strengths and get into the weaknesses, and then complete our chapter 11 on faith has its reasons for the evidentialist. Evidentialists. So as always, we thank you for joining us and continuing to watch the short clips and going to caveofthecross.com to see all the other books that we've done before and all the short clips there. And then we always say thank you, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.